Hello and welcome to the Business of Winning podcast, brought to you by Performance Insights, providing expert speakers and hosts from the world of Formula One motor racing to corporate events and conferences worldwide. Just click on www.performanceinsights.co.uk and send us your requirements.
Well, you're very welcome to the latest episode of the Business of Winning podcast, brought to you by Performance Insights. I'm Mark Gallagher, and today I'm very pleased to say we're joined by none other than Bradley Skeins. Brad, to his friends, he is a high-performance coach. He was performance coach to Max Verstappen, Formula One World Champion. Indeed, he helped Max to the first three of his 4 World Championship titles, and I'm delighted to have this conversation with Brad because it's not often you get to spend time with someone who's been at the shoulder of greatness and playing a pivotal role in that. Brad has a formidable career. He graduated from Loughborough University with a Bachelor of Science in Sport and Exercise Science. He went on to do physiotherapy at the University of Essex. He's worked with the NHS. He's worked with football clubs. He's worked with UFC fighters, pro cyclists, basketball teams, Team GB basketball for the 2016 Olympic cycle, then Team GB gymnastics for the 2020-21 Olympic cycle. He's also worked with Max Whitlock, who won World Championships and Olympic gold. Maybe there's something to do with Brad and people called Max, but he has worked with lots of other gymnasts, and then in 2019 found himself sitting across the table from Max Verstappen and family, talking about Max's requirements to go from good to great and hopefully unlock the first of his World Championship titles. And that's exactly what they did together. And Brad worked with Max all the way through those first 3 World Championship titles before making the very difficult decision to step back from Formula One, partly for family reasons. But I suspect this is not the last we're going to see or hear from Brad. He's got big plans for the future, still working in motorsport, still has a foot in the Formula One camp. And he's certainly got a huge amount of expertise to bring and to bear on people at the very pinnacle of motorsport and indeed sport in general. A few lessons in this, I think, for all of us in terms of if you have a high pressure business life, lots of travel, lots of targets, lots of deadlines, and Brad touches on some of the things that perhaps we should all be thinking about as we try to achieve that work-life balance and also to unlock the potential that lies within us. So I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I enjoyed doing it. Brad Skeins is his name again, and here we go. So Brad, great to have you on the Business of Winning podcast, and Happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year to you, Mark, and pleasure to be here.
What are your plans for 2025 ahead? Because you're turning your expertise to a number of different things, aren't you?
I've been around a bit in the world of sport and the world of high performance, and I've been fortunate that reputation has led to a number of different avenues within sort of motorsports and other sports. So this year, me and a couple of my colleagues are working with a couple of motorsports teams, building out both with their drivers, but also the entirety of the team, engineers, mechanics, in terms of how we can improve their performance trackside. And then working with a number of drivers, athletes, and also general population through my sort of own physio and training business as well. So it's looking like a busy year, but exciting at the same time.
That's great. Now, I said in the introduction that you worked with someone who we all know quite well from Formula One, Max Verstappen, of course, 4 times world champion. And I really wanted to start with a very basic age-old question that I often get, and I'm sure you get it as well. Is a Formula One driver actually an athlete? And maybe you could go into the specifics of what it is about Formula One that the drivers have to prepare for, and perhaps how they go about preparing for it and the challenge that's involved in the task of being a top Formula One performer.
It is an age-old question, and there's that kind of moniker around it that they just sit in the car and they drive, and it's super interesting because it's also reflected in medical and the sports science world as well. Because when I started in F1, I first met Max in 2019. I deep dived into the research around Formula One, and at the time there was like 73 research papers, which is crazy when you consider like other areas of the body. A simple ligament in the knee might have 12,000 papers a year. So it's there's a dearth of kind of knowledge around that. But I teach a little bit on it now. I work with a lot of people, and I always refer to them as a driver athlete. And I think we can now, because me or you couldn't sit in that car and drive that car. It's it's more akin to a fighter pilot, or the sort of forces and G-force that are on them. So I think we can now consider them an athlete, because not everyone could do it. And when we think about that, they're having to deal with multiple demands on their body. So cardiovascularly, they're burning the same amount of calories that you would do running a half marathon. So they're having that sort of output effect on their body. At the same time, they're probably dealing with about 50-degree heat in the cockpit as well, unless we're in somewhere like Spa. And then they're having to deal with much other stuff. Strength-wise, they've got G-force on the neck. So it could be up to about 42 kilos pushing on the side of their head for, anywhere from sort of 0.1 to around 1 second. And if you're doing 70 laps, that's 70 times during the course of a race. They're having to engage the lower body as well. So they're having to apply, brake force. So coming into Monza, they're having to apply about 100 kilos of force on the brake to bring the car to a stop, going from, over 300 kph to 90 kph in about a second. And at the same time, they're having to press 20 buttons on the steering wheel and talk to their engineer and make high pressured decisions under pressure as to whether I overtake at this corner or the next corner, or don't end up in the wall. So lots of kind of stress on that body, and it makes it quite a unique sport in that way, both from considering them an athlete, but also from someone that works with them and how best to sort of improve on those aspects as well. So yeah, plenty going on, but I would say certainly an athlete now.
So it's very interesting to just get that from the horse's mouth and hear you describe the challenge, because I think all of us, certainly I know myself included, we watch Formula One on TV and we think, oh, I could do that. You see a driver make a slight mistake and you think, oh, he's an idiot.
Yeah.
And precisely to your point, the average person really couldn't cope with the challenge, could they, of driving a contemporary F1 car?
No. I remember talking to Max about it, and he said, as soon as you sit in that car, as soon as you even touch the accelerator pedal, you're straight in the wall, because you just don't. It's just gonna rocket ship out there. He said, maybe you could get in like a GT3 Cup car and do something there. I'd still put it in the wall, but maybe. But the kind of speed that those cars go at, and yeah, it's. We wouldn't be able to do it. It's you're trained as a fighter pilot now. That's the sort of G-forces, and I think we, as science practitioners, we can take more kind of research from fighter pilots than we can actually in the literature, because there isn't a lot, especially on F1. F1 and FIA don't really allow too much around that from a research point of view. But it is an interesting one, because there is also a kind of bench line that you have to reach. So as a Formula One driver, you don't have to be super, super fit, but you have to have a degree of fitness. And I think this is where some crossover still comes now, because if they are triathlon fit, let's say, or, power lifter fit, strength, cardio, they're not going to probably improve on their lap time. It's not going to make them quicker. But if they don't reach a certain level of fitness, then they could lose lap time, or they could, last 15 laps of a race, fatigue kicks in, decision-making under pressure goes out the window, cognitive load is too much, and they have a crash. So there's a kind of baseline level to get to. They don't have to be super fit.
Now, you and I are recording this podcast at the beginning of 2025, and there are lots of people who've made New Year's resolutions about such things as losing weight, getting a little bit fitter, maybe having more sleep every night. Talk to me about some of those aspects from a Formula One driver's point of view. So nutrition. David Coulthard told me at length one day about how much he enjoyed stopping racing in Formula One because he could properly eat a meal for the first time in 15 years. So talk to me about nutrition, but then also this whole point around the potential for sleep deprivation with all this long haul travel. And particularly now that we have 24 races, most of them, are not in Europe. So they're long haul destinations, and some of them are triple headers. So you're literally going from one part of a continent to the other. So how do those facets come into the work that you do with someone like Max Verstappen?
It's a big part of it. And, once you hit the season, so they'll have a pre-season block where they do most of their fitness work. And then once you hit the season, it's a lot about maintaining and recovering because of these global demands on the body. Nutrition is obviously a big factor. Both we need to be providing the same energy or efficient energy levels for them to be able to work through a race weekend. So, good proteins, good carbohydrates, keeping it super simple. Lots of electrolytes for, hydration and dehydration. But you're right, because you've also got to think about the weight limit within the car. So there's an 80 kilo weight limit within that cockpit, but that includes the seat and the kit. So if the seat weighs anywhere between 1.5 to 2 kilos and the kit weighs around 4 kilos potentially, a driver is maximum 74.5, if not needing to be lower. And for someone who, Max, is relatively tall, some of the other drivers are as well, and built, it can be quite hard to get to that. So I definitely get David's viewpoint. And I know it's a viewpoint that Max shares because he talks about looking forward to finishing and being able to eat what he wants. And I think he knows he'll put on a bit of weight after racing.
I remember David telling me that his diet consisted of maybe having a tuna steak for dinner with a bit of salad, and he'd have maybe some muesli in the morning. And when you're 6'1" or 6'2", a serious question for you is, given your background, how much on the edge of being healthy is a fully grown man who's having to keep to 73, 74 kilos? I mean, that must be kind of borderline, is it?
Yeah, it all depends how you maintain it over the course of the year. So, sometimes they can go up in off season, and bringing it down is probably not bringing it down quickly is probably not the healthiest way to do it. But if you can maintain it, and, you still, with their output as well, in terms of the exercise they have to do and the calories they lose over the course of the race weekend, it's not too restrictive on calories if you manage it over the course of the year and keep it at a kind of good, steady level. As we all know, you mentioned New Year's resolutions, and people will be hitting fad diets now. They'll be dieting for like 3-4 weeks, and then they'll stop because it's too much. Whereas if they just, start to reduce a few percent a week, I always use the example of a can of Coke. If someone has a normal can of Coke, one of the small kind of 330ml ones, it's like 130 calories. If you have one of those a day and you take that out of your diet, you're saving 1,000 calories a week. So you see how you can shift the needle quite soon by just kind of changing the composition and makeup of your diet rather than being super restrictive on kind of calories and stuff there. But certainly if you're on the weight limit, you do sometimes have to be a bit clever with how you work your way through a race weekend from sort of Wednesday, Thursday to quali. That's the kind of most important, where it can impact obviously lap time if you're overweight. I think it's if I remember my numbers rightly, for every 1 kilo over, you lose 0.03 of a second a lap. So, if we think of Russia in 2021, we missed out on pole by 0.02 of a second to Bottas. So we weren't overweight. It wasn't my fault, but but you can see the connotations of kind of where that might sit. And then if we think of the sleep side of things, that's a huge thing now within F1 and the jet lag and the way that we kind of move around, and probably the kind of blocking together of races on continents that F1 is doing helps a little bit, albeit you'll get another impact of just fatigue of people being away, because people are obviously staying out more now, staying away from home and family. So there'll be that kind of just being away fatigue, which, that's also a big thing that a lot of people don't consider on kind of the stresses of the teams as a whole. But that all comes into planning, and we'll plan out. We usually split the F1 season into quarters. Find kind of each quarter where we can have a good kind of week off, really, and have a break from everything, from kind of training and monitoring nutrition, because it's important to implement those kind of rest periods as well, and just give a bit of downtime. But in terms of jet lag, you're constantly planning that. If we're going, say, to Australia, for example, we start 3, 4, 5 days in advance, shifting the sleep pattern, going to bed a bit earlier, getting up a bit earlier, and then, you picking your flights so you land at good times, can get straight to sleep, bit of cardiovascular exercise when you land, just to kind of reset everything. And yeah, all in the planning. A lot of kind of when to sleep on the plane. And, again, for Australia, if you're getting a midday flight so you can land in the evening, 2 p.m. UK time, you need to be asleep on that plane. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard to kind of shift when you're getting there. So we're getting up at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. so that we're knackered by the time that we get onto that flight. So yeah, it's interesting. I think Vegas is always the biggest one to manage, because you going to America, you'd normally shift your circadian rhythm west. So you stay up later, you get up later, and focus on that. When you get on the plane, you want to have a little nap as soon as you get on the plane, and then you're looking to stay up. But with the timings in Vegas, we actually shifted east, as if we were going to like Singapore and Japan, and we were completely fine. It was good, whereas the rest of the team were struggling. So there's a lot of kind of things you can play around with, and light is always the biggest determinant of circadian rhythm. So using sunlight when you're on location, or reading lights and laptop lights on the plane. Caffeine can also help at times. But yeah, all in the planning. And as long as you have a good plan in place and follow it, you can often be quite successful with it.
Now, I want to talk to you about something that you call interaction over intervention. And this is really born out of, I was reading through your biography, and you really weren't someone you knew a lot about Formula One before you got involved in it. You had this unusual meeting with the guy who turned out to be the future 4 times world champion, and ended up working with him. Just talk to us about that experience, but specifically this passion that you have for what you're good at, which is a lot more than, if you like, the mathematics of what you do. It's the mindfulness, it's the engagement that you have with the people that you work with, and the importance of that. So talk to us about the Max experience, and then that philosophy that you have.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's worth starting with, I'm a physio by trade. I'm also a strength and conditioning coach. I've got a bunch of qualifications behind me, but so is everybody else. So is a lot of other people, and a lot of other people can do the technical side of what we do. If you come in with a shoulder injury or back injury, there's plenty of people in the world that can treat you, rehab you, get you better. If you want to race a Formula One car, the physicality of it, there's a lot of people that can get you fit and get you into shape to race a Formula One car. Interaction over intervention it's a moniker that we've had in kind of physio and medical world for a little while, but there's bits of research scattered around the physio world that shows that if a client gets on with their physio, they get better, no matter what. So that kind of, it's trust, it's empathy, it's, hope, and all those things that come in with having a good relationship, good communication, good interaction.
It sounds to me like what you're describing is what we often talk about between drivers and race engineers. Once a driver and a race engineer develop an incredibly sort of almost symbiotic relationship, the performance just starts to increase. So it's all about this teamwork and trust, as you say, trust and transparency between people.
it's the same with any athlete and any coach, and as soon as you kind of lose that, and there's so many examples over the sporting world. You think of, Jose Mourinho is a great example, and being a big Chelsea fan, it's one I refer to a lot. When he had that Chelsea team on his side, they were unstoppable. They would have gone out and died for him. As soon as he lost one player and then another player and then another player, he was done. And he's been scattered with that over the course of his, entire career. I worked with Max Whitlock, who's Great Britain's greatest ever gymnast. So 3-time Olympic gold medalist, a bunch of world championships and stuff. So I worked with him for 4 years leading into the Tokyo Olympics, where we won gold on the pommel horse, and a world championship together as well. And this was a world championship before I was working with him back in 2016, maybe somewhere around that sort of time. And this is a great kind of story about kind of flexibility and adaptability, but trust with the coach's relationship. So he's going out last. He's sitting in second place for the World Championship. And in gymnastics, you have two scores. So you have your difficulty of the routine and the execution of the routine. And you get scored for both, and your total score makes your position and your placement. And he's in the tunnel waiting to go out. And his coach, Scott, who's, again, fantastic coach, he says to Max, you can't win this. You can't get gold medal because your difficulty of routine, the score isn't high enough to jump. No matter how you execute it, you can't get the top score. 30 seconds before they go out, they change the routine between them. And, amazing ability to be flexible, adaptable, and perform under the chaos from Max. But the trust that the two of them had together to know that they could build another routine and, boom or bust is just phenomenal. And you don't have that unless you have that, like you say, symbiotic relationship where there's just full trust between the two of them. And it'd be the same as, a setup of a car between GP and Max, Miami 2023, starting in P11, only car to start on the hards, and we go out there and win the race, P11 to P1. It's that trust.
You make it sound so easy. P11 to P1, and that's the thing about Max, is his ability to adapt and do what's necessary to take the win.
Yeah, and we'll probably get onto this at some point, but when I'm asked about what the difference is between the very best athletes that I've worked with, it is exactly that. It's flexibility, it's adaptability to perform when everything is chaotic, when it's complete chaos. Max is being interviewed moments before he puts his helmet on and gets in the car. It doesn't happen in any other sport in the world. Max Whitlock is changing his routine 30 seconds before he goes out. Lucy Charles Barkley, another world champion who won Ironman last year, 2 years ago now, because we're 2025. She goes into the run, pulls her calf in the first mile of a marathon, and still goes and wins it. To hold on, and the tear she had afterwards was crazy, and I don't know how she finished it, but it's the ability just to shut everything out and perform when everything's going wrong or chaotic or anything there.
So talk to me about 2019. You go to Barcelona to meet Max Verstappen. You've had this call to say that someone called Max was interested in working with you. I'm not going to try and draw a parallel here. Was it like a love at first sight thing? Did you meet each other and think, we're just going to get on well, or did you have to work at it? I can't imagine for Max, this was a small decision to choose the person who, in your case, is going to be so critical to everything that's going to happen over the next 4 or 5 years.
On one hand, I probably got a little bit lucky. I was kind of the last person he was trialing with. So he had, I think, seen 3 people before me, and one had gone out to Abu Dhabi with him and, had a bit of a trial. So he'd met some people, physios, S&C coaches, and, was choosing between 3 or 4 of us. I was the kind of last one up, as it were. 'Cause I think it was like the 16th of December or something along those lines. And also I think, again, that kind of symbiotic relationship comes when you get kind of two similar people, right? And we are quite similar in, our interests, our kind of mindset, our love for winning, and kind of what we want to get out of work, let's say, treating it as a sort of job there. So our discussion, first and foremost, you can see that, we would just get on, we could have a conversation, we could talk about what was going on that day or about the football game the night before. We could talk about some of the physio and strength stuff that was going on there as well. But and I remember leading in because I had spoken to someone who was kind of organizing the meetings for him, and he was saying, look, you're seeing people, you kind of, if you want the kind of job, you need to go in and be a little bit different. And I wasn't too different. I was just kind of myself, but I remember sitting down and saying, look, I've won a world championship. How do we get you to win one? This is what we're here for. At the end of the day, we can get on, we can do whatever, but how do we win a world championship? I know nothing about Formula One. You're going to have to teach me, but I can bring this. That was our lunchtime conversation, along with getting on with everything else. I think the other flip side was, for me, was his family was there. Some of his friends was there. His girlfriend was there at the time. And interaction over intervention, my way of working is discovery, getting on with everyone, finding everything out. And, I got on with his dad, I got on with his girlfriend, got on with his friends, and it just kind of blossomed from there.
I mean, the Dutch are quite direct, aren't they?
Yeah.
In the way they deal with you. And they like a certain bluntness, a certain directness, which I suppose you saying to him, well, I've won a world championship, that would appeal to Max, because I think we all know how obsessed he was to make the breakthrough.
And I think it's just my way of working as well. I'm a very simple guy. I like to keep things really, really simple. And, if it's a case of we got to get strong somewhere, I'm not going to fluff around with 5, 6, 7, 8 different exercises. We're just going to do one thing and we're going to work on that one thing until you're really bloody good at it. And, we're not going to be you sometimes see, in the world of social media and, you see all these like weird and wonderful exercises, drivers standing here with weights, pretending to use them as steering wheels and this sort of thing. Well, hang on, they've got power steering in the car. They don't need to be doing that. So it's just about keeping it really, really simple.
I can't believe you're telling me that what we see on Instagram is not the real world.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about inside the head, the mental side of it, because going back to the couple of examples you just gave where an athlete can change their strategy at the last minute, or they can actually decide, okay, yeah, I've got a little bit of an injury here, but I'm going to overcome it and I'm still going to win. So much of that it starts and finishes with what's happening inside the brain and that aspect of it. And I think we all know, certainly in Formula One, we know that the mental side of it is extremely important. What's your, not just your take on that, what's your view on the importance of the mental approach to the challenge of trying to become a world champion, whether it's in Formula One or anything else?
Yeah, it's interesting because every athlete seems to, take a different approach to it, but they all still come out with the same outcome. And a lot of it is just being able to trust yourself and trust the people around you and have, again, it comes back to those kind of relationships and bits there. And then along with that, just, we use the term mental toughness a lot, don't we? And I think that's born out of years and years of struggle and determination around a singular goal. There was an interesting research paper not so long ago that showed a high percentage of world champions, and this was done in America, but a high percentage of world champions had some sort of adversity, some sort of struggle to overcome early on in kind of life, and it kind of built that kind of mental kind of toughness to that. And so you kind of look at the athletes you've worked with and kind of start to find or kind of figure out where they might have it, because not all athletes come from hardship or the real adversity that we'd kind of think about. But when you look back through, Max Verstappen, got into karting very early, lots of pressures as a young kid, lots of pressures from kind of family and stuff. And they talk very fondly about it now and kind of laugh and love about it. But that clearly gave him the sort of mental toughness to go on and be a world champion. Max Whitlock, he moved to Slovakia or Slovenia when he was a young kid without his family to go and train with a certain coach and try and be a world champion gymnast. So again, that, albeit it's not, adversity as we'd think about it, it is for a young kid moving away and stuff like that. So I think there's an element of it being set quite early on. And then you can build on that in terms of, centering things around the goals you want to achieve and breaking it down into, kind of smaller chunks as you move your way through.
What you're talking about there strikes me is, I think, what lay people we talk about the hunger that we see in some of these world champions. They have this raw hunger. I mean, I've had the privilege of doing an event with Lewis Hamilton, and we were on stage for an hour talking to a group of executives about Lewis's life, and he talked very openly about some of the things he faced as a young kid, racism that he suffered at school, bullying he suffered at school. And the more he talked about it, the more you could see that this helped to mold him into the person he is. He could have just been angry about it, but instead of that, he channeled it into doing something. So, and it's a very interesting facet of Formula One. Even someone like Ayrton Senna, who came from actually quite a well-off background, but because he left Brazil and came to live in England on his own at a young age in Norfolk, nothing wrong with Norfolk, but it's not, you know what I'm saying? I know from people who met him at that time said, like, he really hated, being away from home and the family, but he did what was necessary. And that hunger sort of came through. So, and your point about Max, I think a lot of people see him and think, oh, well, he's the son of Jos Verstappen. He's had it easy. His dad was wealthy and he was a Formula One driver. But actually, his father was not mollycoddling him as a kid, was he? He was pushing him very, very hard to come through. And Max has developed into this formidable competitor, hasn't he?
Yeah, he was certainly creating a world champion, that's for sure. And the relationship them two have now is just phenomenal. It's so nice to see, and it's and to hear Max talk about it as well in such a loving and thankful way is really nice. So, but that brings in, so they kind of that kind of final piece of that kind of mental aspect to it, and you can take from the younger years and the adversity faced, you can build on it with kind of the goals and the kind of mindset aspects that you can have, mental performance training, all that sort of stuff. But then that kind of final piece of the puzzle would be the kind of emotional element to it, because a lot of people have had adversity over the years, but they haven't become world champions, right? And, there's a skill and a technical ability to that as well. But there's also a big part of that kind of emotional control of what you've got. When we look at athletes, and this is where you can kind of really delve in and start to apply it to anybody. We're talking in athletes, athletics, football, Formula One, but also business CEOs, me, you, in terms of if we have the ability from a technical and physical side of things, how can we then flip the switch to become really, really good? And this is where, not to go too deep into the kind of psychological side of things, but there's a model called the circumplex model of emotion in psychology, and it's a kind of a four corner aspect. And when you're sitting in top right, and this is used in like Navy SEALs and Marines to be in that kind of flow state, and it's where technical, physical, and then your kind of interests, values, happiness all align to be able to just shut everything else off and just be in that kind of in the zone, as you call it. And it is a thing, people talk about in the zone, they talk about flow state, they talk about that kind of hyper focus, and these guys really have it. They do.
Now, let's just talk about that a little bit further, because one of the things that we do at Performance Insights is we bring a lot of experts from Formula One into corporate environments. And I myself have done a lot of speaking over the years with very senior executives, many of whom are under huge amounts of pressure to perform, working in large, very, very often large multinational companies, doing a lot of travel. They've got a lot of people reporting to them. They've got big, big targets to achieve. Work-life balance can be all over the place because, they're in the middle of their career and working all the hours of the day. From your perspective, what should executives be starting to think about in terms of unlocking the potential that they have, not just to perform at work, but to perform in life? Because it's about having a holistic approach, I suppose, to ensuring the well-being and the outcomes that you want, whether that's in yourself or in your professional career.
It's so important. And you mentioned it there, to coincide everything in life, right? And, I won't pull examples of this, but within all the athletes I've worked with, I've seen moments when they're going through some struggles in their personal life, and it's directly impacted on what they're doing on a weekend or an event, a race, a match, or something from there. And when we look at it, so if we are a CEO and we want to be pushing that needle a little bit more, then you need to be kind of looking at that whole thing. Your kind of interests, your values, the technical ability, responsiveness, the people around you all need to be in that kind of happy place. And this is when we talk about that kind of hitting that kind of top right of the graph. And that's where your sort of what we call your arousal levels. So that kind of positive emotion is there, but it coincides with whether you're happy. And if you're not happy, what you end up doing is falling into a high arousal state, but not being able to control those emotions. And that's where you get kind of, dangerous overtakes, or potentially, shouting, swearing, screaming on the radio, those sort of things. It's where, they're all kind of a little bit misaligned. And then the kind of bottom part of that is if the appraisal's not there and the alignment of, the aiming for a certain goal or going after a world championship, you kind of get that sort of dampened approach there. One side we need because we've got to recover and be happy, but the other side is kind of that kind of sad, depressive sort of spiraling routine. So, and it's also a good way to sort of pick staff as well. As long as they have that kind of responsiveness to training, happy, high arousal, you can then see that they're going to fit into your kind of team and stuff around there. There's obviously plenty of other stuff you can look at, from physical fitness side of things, nutrition, mindset, mental performance, visualization, mental imagery. But I think if you can control the emotional side of it, the rest of that comes naturally. I'm working with some strategists at the moment, and we're doing some visualization training, some mental imagery stuff, because we know that, just 10 minutes of visualization training can improve your decision-making process anywhere up to the region of like 80%. If they can control their emotion and their heart rate spikes when they're on the pit wall, then they're going to make better decisions. The same way that a driver overtaking at turn 5 in Abu Dhabi might be a little bit risky. Pit stopping on the 11th lap might be the wrong decision as well, but they could be making that under high arousal, unhappy sort of feeling as well.
The visualization topic is a very interesting one because, again, during the course of my career in Formula One, it came up in a number of ways, a number of times with different drivers, where because of their ability to visualize outcomes, they could increase the chances of that outcome happening. And it almost seemed to me initially as a kind of quite a bizarre thing. But then when you think about it, if you're going to visualize an outcome, you are naturally going to be thinking about, how do I work towards achieving that? And it starts to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you like. Let me ask you another question, Brad. Looking at your career, you started in your Loughborough University, where you did your BSc in Sport and Exercise Science, and then graduated at the University of Essex with a pre-reg Masters in Physiotherapy. You worked in football, You've worked in UFC. You've worked in cycling, Giro Italia. You've worked in basketball. You've worked, as you mentioned, in gymnastics. You've worked in Formula One. I mean, such an array of sports that you have worked across. So are they all teaching you quite similar things about the attributes of successful people, or do you notice really quite significant differences? I mean, so is there a common thread that runs through success irrespective of sport, or is each really quite unique?
I think a bit of both. You see the common thread. You see the highest performers, the greatest, have similar kind of psychological traits, mindset traits. I mentioned before, that kind of flexibility, that adaptability, that kind of singular focus on what they want to achieve, zero distractions. But then each sport, I've been so lucky to work in all these different sports because it has really kind of modeled me as a practitioner and enabled me to take things from all of these sports and all of these athletes and apply them to kind of one another. We can take a lot of training principles from basketball and apply them to Formula One because basketball have a similar kind of travel schedule. They compete either multiple nights back to back or, every other day, different time zones, and how they manage to maintain physical fitness over the course of the year isn't too dissimilar to how you can kind of structure around Formula One and its travel and maintenance through there. Yes, you pull from each. I think I'm very lucky to have had those opportunities, and hopefully it's each athlete that I've worked with along the way, it's made them a little bit better as well.
Now, it just so happens that today, when we're recording this, is Lewis Hamilton's 40th birthday, and Fernando Alonso is 43 years of age. Give us your take on these two giants of our sport who are now in their early 40s. What's your view on that? I mean, considering what you talked about earlier on in terms of the athleticism involved in Formula One. We all know, I certainly know, as you get older, things begin to change. What's your view on Formula One in 2024 for a couple of guys who are now in their 40s? Is it problematic? Does it become more problematic to perform, or do you feel these guys are so well tuned into it?
It's a really interesting one, and first and foremost, credit to them for maybe define what we think is possible. And we've started to see it in also multiple sports as well. Tom Brady playing at, 40, 42 and still winning championships with the Bucks. LeBron James, he's pushing his age and playing so many minutes on the court floor and dominating. So I think it's possible in any sports. And, knowing Lewis and knowing Fernando a little bit, they look after themselves, clean diets, clean living, everything is good from that perspective. They train pretty hard, and they have a high, what we'd call chronic load in the car as well. So you're right. It kind of carries on over the years and they're able to keep on going. So I think we just don't know. And because you can keep yourself in physical shape for this, because you can train hard. Yes, you can't be as fit as someone in their mid-20s and their mid-30s, but you can be fit. We see 70-year-olds run triathlons and set quicker times than I could. So the training aspect can be there. The driving aspect, if you keep that up, can be there. You would start to think maybe that skills like reaction time or visual perception and visual acuity might go. And that will be an interesting study to look at the kind of vision component. Now, this is just anecdotal, just from me working in motorsports for what will be my 6th year now. What I think we see is the biggest differential factors between the very best and that kind of second crop may be visual acuity, so that the way they see and the way they perceptualize distance and kind of knowledge of where they are in time and space, and then that decision making under pressure and having the capacity to be able to do that. when we look at like the figures for reaction time this year, like Lewis Hamilton's second or third out of everybody over the whole course of the season. So there's definitely no drop off in his reaction time. Fernando was I think Fernando was in top 5 or 6 as well. So, that hasn't dropped off.
Interesting. It is kind of new territory with these two guys because they both happen to be multiple world champions as well as both now in their 40s. Happy birthday, Lewis.
There may be one other aspect, sorry to interrupt, that again is not tested, and I'm just kind of throwing it out there as well, but neither of them and again, I don't always come across wrong or anything like that, but neither of them have like family and stuff there as well. Obviously they've got their family, but they haven't, they're not settled down, they haven't got kids, etc., etc. So they can still throw it into a corner with zero fear. You kind of see what I mean? There might be an aspect there as well. I don't know. These 3 things are just kind of anecdotal that come from watching very closely from a performance aspect. But I think it's incredible what they're doing. Incredible.
We used to say that every time a driver had a child, it was worth, it basically took about the 10th of a second a lap off them because they want to go home and see their kids at the end of the day. And
I wouldn't be surprised. And yeah, I don't know. It'd be so interesting to sit down with someone like Seb or, and have that conversation because, I don't know. It'd be super interesting.
A couple of other things, Brad, I wanted to talk to you about. I'm so interested to see that you've moved into working in the World Endurance Championship, Formula 3, Formula 4, GT Cup, all that kind of stuff. Still, of course, have a foot in Formula 1. I wanted to talk to you about the Le Mans 24-hour program because I used to own a team called Status Grand Prix, and we did Le Mans 4 times. And as someone who came from Formula 1 into Le Mans, my goodness, what a wake-up call that was in terms of the challenge of that. I'm really interested to hear your perspective on what's required, not just of the drivers, but the whole team to do an event like the Le Mans 24 hours.
Yeah, it's nuts. It's nuts. And I think actually, I've been, again, super lucky to work 4 years in Formula 1, some of the biggest and best races we've ever seen in Formula 1. But I think Le Mans 24 is potentially one of my favorite events I've ever done because the challenge of it blew your mind. And there's so many moving pieces as well because we planned out the whole sleep schedule. And then, I think we got 3.5 hours and I'm asleep, my phone literally next to my ear, ready to wake the driver up. And an hour and a half into what I thought was going to be like a 3-hour sleep, my phone's ringing. You got me in the car. And we went from bed to car in like 18 minutes. He's sleeping in his kit, but, very quick warm up, very quick hydration, nutrition out into the car. And then he drove for 4 hours because, strategy changes as you go. So you're always kind of working on the fly, no matter what plans you put in place. And I'm actually going out and working with a team in Daytona 24 in 2 weeks' time. So yeah, super excited for that. And literally putting together sleep strategies now for the team and bits there.
That's exciting.
For me, from a performance aspect, it's just making sure every single aspect is considered because you can plan it all out and it's important to have a plan there. But by the time you finish, to quote Ferrari, you're going to be on like plan Z. So it's just making sure that you don't kind of miss anything from performance aspect. If you're working with drivers, you want to be there as the person that just kind of takes all that away because they don't want to think about that. They want to just be told, go get your head down or whatever. I think it's also important to not put any stress on any of the staff or the drivers as well to get sleep because actually not many of them are going to sleep. And I think this is a really important learning point for anybody that's going into work in a 24-hour race. Their adrenaline is going to be way too high to get to sleep for an hour and a half, as much as you would love them to get an hour and a half sleep. But go in a dark room, eyes closed, eye mask on, all phones, all tablets off, and just resting as if you are sleeping can replenish the body in a way as well. You've got to maintain good nutrition and hydration throughout. Bit of mobility, bit of warm up each time that you're going to get into the car. You need to have a kind of calming down period as well. So you don't want them sticking around after they get out the car, quick chat with the engineer, but come on, we've got to dampen you back down and just get that heart rate down. So you get some bodily function rest, even though it's not kind of sleep. And then the kind of second important lesson, which I really learned in Le Mans, because again, Le Mans is quite unique and it's like a 9-day event. And testing starts a week earlier, and then you have like these days of festivals in the town and stuff. So everything is load. So media is load, going to have to do interviews and marketing events is load and stress on the body, both physically and mentally. So managing that throughout the week and working with the team and the team manager and driver manager and stuff is really, really important, because you arrive at race weekend official, and you're knackered already. you're then fighting a very losing battle. So I think those two things, rest is, as good as sleeping in 24 hours, because they're probably not going to sleep, and managing the whole week leading up, if not the week before that, is really, really important.
The final thing I wanted to ask you about is you're contracted to Red Bull in the UK, working with athletes in a whole range of sports. How's that for you? Because you must be meeting some really quite young kids, young athletes doing a whole wide range of things. And presumably some of them are just very good at it because they're so young. But then there's the reality of actually having to increase their level and their performance. But I mean, the Red Bull program is something that I've always thought was a fantastic legacy of Dietrich Mateschitz, that he created this amazing platform for so many young athletes to pursue their dreams and to do these fantastic sports.
Yeah, amazing, really. His love for sport was just phenomenal. There's never been someone like him, and maybe never will be again. Red Bull are involved in over 250 different sports worldwide, their own teams. They sponsor different athletes. They provide performance facilities for these athletes to come in and have a full workup and be supported through their entire journey. So it's tremendous, and long may that go on. For me personally, it's been phenomenal. Not only I've been racing at the very pinnacle of motorsports, but I get to work with a world champion triathlete, or a young BMXer who wants to go out and win a gold medal at the Olympics, or I went to see I forget what they call it, but the guys that jump out the plane in the fly suits.
Oh yeah, the wingsuit flyers.
Yeah, and you're like, and for me, like, I love it because I love sport, like across the board, and me kind of being able to take a new sport and like deep dive in it in a performance aspect, what the physical demands, what the mental demands, and really build out what that looks like and how I can help is kind of probably my biggest enjoyment. Hence why going into F1 or going into gymnastics, having never known anything about it, was so exciting. So yeah, it presents a lot of good opportunities for me, and also, as we said before, to learn from these guys and girls and figure out what makes them so good too.
Well, Brad, it's been a pleasure to chat to you. Thank you so much for joining the Business of Winning podcast. Wishing you a very successful year personally and in your business in 2025.
I appreciate it. And thank you for having me on. Really good.
Well, I hope you enjoyed those insights from Brad Skeins. I suspect this is not the last we're going to hear from him by a long way, because he's got big plans ahead in motorsport and sport in general. He's clearly used to working with the very best in the business. And I think his insights from working with Max Verstappen are really, really fascinating. I love the fact that whilst he admits that Formula One drivers have to be athletes, they don't need to go to the extreme levels of fitness, just to the right level of fitness, and then to combine that with having the right nutrition, diet, hydration, sleep. Make sure you have a balanced approach, clear your mind so that you can focus on the task in hand. I suspect there's something in that for all of us really to think about. So thanks again to Brad for joining us. If you've got any questions or suggestions that you would like to send to us, you can of course reach us through the Performance Insights website, which is www.performanceinsights.co.uk. The company is also on Instagram, it's on Twitter, and of course it's on LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, indeed, you can reach out to me personally, Mark Gallagher. Very happy to take any questions or suggestions from you, and we look forward to bringing you further insights from the world of Formula One, the business of winning.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to the Business of Winning podcast. And if you want to learn more about performance insights, simply visit our website at performanceinsights.co.uk, providing expert speakers and hosts from the world of Formula One motor racing to corporate events and conferences worldwide.